All right, we're going to get started right now. Hi, everybody. My name is Todd Terrazas, and I'm the Executive Director of the AILA community. We focus on artificial intelligence and frontier technology and how it impacts society. Traditionally, we'd be hosting about 3 different events per month, but given the circumstances, we're going digital now. And so we're really happy to start this new normal series where we have discussions around what this new normal could look like. And today is a special day because we're having a dual feature speaker a talk with Dr. Julie Albright, who's a digital sociologist at USC and an author of a Bloomberg Top 30 book of 2019, Left to Their Own Devices, How Digital Natives Are Reshaping the American Dream. We also have Laura, who is a professor of psychology at the University of Southern California, where she teaches and does research on the gene environment interplay in human behavior. She's also a certified, I'm totally gonna mess this up, Iyengar yoga teacher, and teaches yoga in the science of meditation at USC. And so, without further ado, here is a dual talk by Laura and Julie, and then we'll go right into the breakout discussions. So, thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. So, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen here. And you'll hear from Dr. Laura in just a few moments. We're going to be talking today about reconnecting in a disconnected time. And I've been studying this for a while, this idea of what I call coming untethered. I've been looking at this for the last few years in my book. And what I focused on was digital natives, the idea that young people grew up in a world where there always was an internet. We could take a look at this slide, which is an American, approximately 30-year-old's life so far, probably about 35 by now, but the internet becomes a thing in middle school and mobile phones become a thing in high school. Point being that the internet and connectivity became a part of people's lives at a very young age, part of their growing up, and so they become what I call the untethered generation. And what that means is that behaviors and values have shifted such that they're increasingly optimized for devices, for texting, for social media. And there are some significant value changes underway as a result. For example, if you go online, I started looking at this stuff originally, studying online dating and things like that. I ended up working with eHarmony, developing some of their product. I did my dissertation on online dating. But this idea that the mobile devices and social media and dating apps, et cetera, are giving young people in particular this plethora of choices, and it's reshaping adulthood in the choices that they're making. For example, young adults, particularly millennials, aren't getting married anywhere near the rates of their predecessors, their parents or their grandparents. They're not buying homes. They're not having kids. They're not going to church or joining political parties or joining the local Rotary anywhere near their parents' or grandparents' rates. So that's really changing the face of work as well. As you're not rooted into a particular neighborhood with your kid in the local school and your spouse at a long-term job, you can come untethered. And that means that there's a condition going on now, particularly, again, millennials and young people that grew up as digital natives, where they're unhooking from people and places and jobs and traditional processes and ways of doing things, what sociologists call organizing structures in society, including churches and political parties. These connections are weakened or broken in this moment and are being replaced by digital hyperconnectivity. This constellation of behaviors I call coming untethered, and that's what my focus has been. And the funny thing is, it's such a paradox to me. You've got more ways to connect than ever, more dating apps than ever, and yet more than half of Americans are not in a romantic relationship. In fact, millennials are saying, look at this marital status chart, is just plummeting. Millennials say about a quarter of them have no friends at all. So loneliness is starting to escalate in this era of being more connected, yet disconnected at the same time. So this is what the focus of my book has been, Left to Their Own Devices, this idea of the millennials and digital natives and what the impacts have been of coming untethered. And when we talk about in the workforce, for example, a lot of folks talk about freedom. You're free to pull away from an office, to work anywhere, to work poolside in Bali, to work in your pajamas from home, whatever you want. You can travel to Instagrammable location. Here we have John Young Fook, who's there in that beautiful city in Morocco. But there's a cost to all this freedom, it turns out. This is Caitlin. She's a writer that's living untethered, traveling the world. She's been house sitting here and there and going in Airbnb. And I said to her when I interviewed her for the book, I said, what is it that we don't know about being a digital nomad and traveling around, working anywhere? She says, well, you know what? It's very lonely. And in fact, she has this Adrienne Rich poem, If I'm Lonely. It's and this is tattooed on her body because it's such an integral part of her experience. She told me that she's never in one place long enough to really make deep friendships because then she's on to the next place, but she's not home enough to keep connected with her old friends, and she's sort of drifting apart from them. So she's sort of in this neither here nor there place in terms of relationships. So this coming untethered has unexpected and unintended consequences, you could say. As sociologists, long-term studies show us that these stabilizing structures in society, things like church and marriage and whatnot, they bolster our mental and, believe it or not, physical wellness. So coming unhooked from these things and not really anchoring to some new structure, young people have been suffering in recent years from anxiety and depression. We're seeing the highest rates across colleges in the US in 30 years. You can see on the left are the percent experiencing overwhelming anxiety in the last 2 weeks or in the past year. The blue is 2008 and the gold is 2017. And you can see these rates of just jump. And on the right side is experiencing depression such that it's difficult to function. And again, from 2008 to 2017, you can see those rates have gone up. So this has been my focus, this idea of the digital natives, what this experience is, and how to sort of reconnect when, you know, the only anchoring point is something like Instagram. It's like building your house on sand. So here's the weird part. This book, again, was sort of focused mainly on that group of digital natives, and I've been seeing how those behavioral changes and value changes are sort of spreading to other generations. Older generations in the workforce, for example, are saying, well, yeah, why can't I work from home? You know, why do I have to come into an office? So the weird part is now, fast forward to now where we're at, and we end up in this moment, is Corona time. You might have heard that on TikTok, but this idea that this coronavirus is now driving everybody to live untethered. And I'm not just talking about here, I'm talking about the world over. It's like the largest social experiment we've ever seen in our lifetime at scale. And guess what? Those same identical issues that I identified in my book that are experienced amongst digital natives, now everybody's starting to experience it. This is an article in The Atlantic, you know, this huge stressful experience of working from home. Now, so suddenly everybody finds themselves thrown into what we call digital transformation. Like it or not, here we come. And it's really changing everything. And this is a recent study about those that are sheltering in place and the amount of stress and mental health that they're experiencing, a major negative impact or a minor negative impact. But sheltering in place, not sheltering in place, those are the ones that are going out to work. But you can see it's having a negative impact, being untethered, living away from friends, family, you know, church, whatever those, even the workplace is the social event, is having that impact. So what I would say is, and here's another example, that texts are up to mental health hotlines about 1,000%. So these are just some indicators that now everyone is experiencing what the untethered generation has been experiencing. So the thing is, we're in a liminal moment. It means, liminality means that we're neither here nor there. We've left behind the old behaviors, the old norms, but we're in this weird corona moment such that we haven't yet reestablished new norms and new behaviors yet. And liminality comes from the Latin word threshold. And I started thinking, like, where else do we hear that word threshold? Well, we used to hear it when people got married. The groom would carry the bride across the threshold. And the idea being, I mean, look at those happy faces. The idea being that they're crossing into a new life together. They're starting afresh, they're starting anew with new family rituals, new behaviors, new time together, new experiences. And that's the way that we can think about it. If we're being creative, we can think about this as a liminal period where we can reflect, step back, and decide what behaviors we want to carry forward into the sort of new normal and what behaviors we want to set aside, like maybe overconsumptions of things. You know, how do we want to live more sustainably, for example, and things like that. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Laura, and she's going to continue on talking about some of the ways that we can sort of reconnect in these disconnected times. And thanks so much for having us.
Hello, how's everyone? Can you see this okay? Julie, give me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. So thank you again to Todd for inviting us to be able to share our ideas with your community. And thank you, Julie, for that wonderful presentation on the trends that you've observed in both technology and behavior. So interesting. I loved reading your book. And as I was reading your book too, I really thought of another trend that's going on. And I want to call everyone's attention to this idea that in the US, in the last several decades, we've seen this huge increase in interest in yoga and meditation. And you can see this kind of depicted in these Time magazine covers from the 1970s through more recent times. But not only is there an increase in interest in these techniques, these methods of self-realization, we could call them, but there's been a growing interest in the practice of using these. There was a survey done in 2012 that suggested 18 million people had done meditating at least once that year. And then just a couple of years later, 35 million people are reporting meditating regularly in 2017. And I dare say that this has even increased further since we've entered this kind of untethered, disconnected time. I did just this quick little Google Trend search on online yoga classes, and check out what happens right about the time we all go into quarantine around the middle of March. Search for online yoga classes shoots way up. So people are very interested in, how can I do more of this? How can I get involved in yoga now? So, and if you did a search for meditation online, you'd see something similar, but the one for yoga is particularly striking. Here at USC, where I teach, and so does Julie, I teach in the psychology department, but we have what's called a Mindful USC program, where we've been offering free meditation classes to students, faculty, and staff for the last several years. And what happened was those classes were very popular, but right about the time that we all went inside, and Alan Weiss, who directs the Mindful USC program here at USC, he quickly figured out how to get the in-person classes switched to be online. And we saw this tremendous increase. The registration was up something like 86% from last year. They've gone online now. We've gone from 25 people per class in an in-person class to 100 people per class, and they had to triple the number of classes that they were offering. And this is to help to meet that challenge that Julie's describing about the rising emotional difficulties that people are having. They were having them before: anxiety, uncertainty, depression. Our college students are definitely facing these. I can tell you, I'm seeing this in my classes and my students. I also live in one of the dorms here at USC, and I live with the students, and I see this firsthand. And definitely when we were all forced to go online, those things all skyrocketed. So these techniques are really an interesting way for us to try to be able to deal with some of these challenges at the moment. And there's definitely interest in practice. So I just want to point out that yoga and meditation are really part of a bigger scheme of what we could call contemplative practices. These are actually ancient practices that have been around for centuries. And that includes yoga, and it includes things like sitting in silence, watching your breath. There's all kinds of different forms of meditation you could see in this tree here. And you could think about these different practices being of two general varieties. One of them being the kinds of meditation practices that are what we call focused attention, where you're trying to really develop your attention skills and get to that one-pointed thinking. And yoga is one of those, the focus being on the body and then the breath to be able to bring you inward. And there are other forms of meditation like sitting in silence that involve more what we call insight training, more mindfulness development, learning to observe things and see things as they are and become less attached to our thoughts and our emotions. But all of these techniques have one thing in common. They're really trying to take us inside, to connect with ourselves, and to reach some kind of, let's say, higher level of consciousness, an altered state of consciousness. The word that we use for this might be different depending on the tradition. It might be samadhi in yoga or nirvana, but they're all techniques that take us inside and bring us to some kind of self-realization. So I personally have been very involved in yoga, and maybe 15 years ago, I wandered into a yoga class, an Iyengar yoga class, struggling with a knee injury, and I was trying to figure out how to get some relief from that. And I lucked out and landed in a class with an amazing teacher who just took me under her wing. She supported me with props and really showed me not only how to rehabilitate my knee, but over the course of time, this eventually became not just a physical practice, but a very spiritual one as well. And eventually I became a certified Iyengar yoga instructor. And so I've studied this method of Iyengar yoga, which is really well known for focusing on alignment, using props to help support people so that you can do poses in a way that you might not be able to if you had injuries. But again, this is not just a physical practice. It's a focused attention methodology that helps to really take you inward. And in fact, we see the goal of yoga is written in the very second of the Yoga Sutras written by Patanjali ages ago, where he said, Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is for calming the fluctuations of consciousness. So this is the method that I've become involved in. And I just want to say that we have this tremendous opportunity right now, since we're all inside and we're worrying about how we're going to be connecting with the world. This is actually an amazing opportunity for us to be going inside and connecting with ourselves and looking inside and trying to figure out, who am I and what is my purpose in life? What's the meaning of life? But how does my mind work, and how can I be more connected with myself? And as we become more connected with ourselves, that puts us in a better position to have more mental health, to be able to help other people, and to connect with the world in a better way, I would argue. So, and it's not to say that we don't need technology for yoga. I mean, this is an ancient practice. Yoga has been done without technology for centuries. But right at the moment, in this disconnected time, it turns out technology is being a very useful thing for us. This is the granddaughter of B.K.S. Iyengar. He died a few years ago, and she's really taken up the mantle and is now leading this worldwide organization of Iyengar yoga practitioners. And this week, in the past week, Abhijata has actually been teaching 1,300 yoga practitioners here in the US from her home in India. And it's been new for her to go on to Zoom and teach. And she was sort of reluctant at first, but it's been this amazing experience where we're all coming together as a community and practicing our yoga, and it's taking us deeper and really examining where we are in this particular moment. And one of the things that really struck me in one of her first classes in this endeavor was that she said, one of the boons of yoga is it does give us this opportunity to connect with ourselves. The technology can bring us these classes and the instructions, but it's actually the yoga technology is what takes us inward. So eventually we, learn and hopefully take over and go inside ourselves. So tremendous opportunity at the moment to be able to go inside and connect with ourselves. There's another trend I also want to point out, in that there's been this amazing interest and growth in mainstream science, being able to understand how the mind works by studying yoga and meditation and figuring out how these work. You can see this from these Science magazine covers over the years, back from the interest in how transcendental meditation worked back in the 1970s to really understanding mechanisms of pain right now. So over the last couple of decades, you can see an increase in the interest and the number of publications that are coming out in this field, the science of meditation. In fact, what's really emerged is a new field that we call contemplative neuroscience, where we're really trying to understand how the brain is involved in meditation and how meditation and yoga can actually change the brain. So there was a great article a few years ago called The Mind of the Meditator, where a handful of neuroscientists, very well-known neuroscientists, who actually were what they called closet meditators. They'd been studying with the Dalai Lama for years. They suddenly had this impetus to be able to bring together these ancient practices that are very subjective, what we call first-person methods for studying the mind, and marrying those with the third-person, more empirical approaches like brain imaging and psychophysiology, and being able to bring these together to be able to study how the mind works kind of from these different perspectives. So it's kind of an East meets West as they come together and trying to study the mind. So some of the questions that come up: what happens in the brain when I'm meditating? What happens to my brain afterwards? How else does meditation affect my body and my mind? And what are the mechanisms that are underlying these effects? If you really wanted to take a deep dive into the science of meditation and yoga, I could suggest the book by Richie Davidson and Daniel Goleman called Altered Traits, where they really review the research in a very digestible way. And it's a very recent book, so good deep dive into the science of meditation there. But just to summarize, some of the key findings that are coming out of this research are things that you hear about all the time. Yoga and meditation can actually help reduce stress. We're understanding the mechanisms by which that happens through the nervous system and through brain mechanisms. There actually are reductions in anxiety and depression. The immune system is enhanced, and so on. Inflammation is reduced. There's actually processes whereby we can actually slow aging physiologically through these techniques. So interesting that just by sitting and thinking, or trying not to think, and working on kind of understanding your mind, that you can have these physical and psychological effects. I find it really interesting at this particular moment that these techniques can actually enhance our immune system. And there have actually been a number of studies that actually show that yoga and meditation can actually change these peripheral blood markers that really do show that our immune systems really are enhanced. And so it's no wonder that Iyengar yogis and other yogis are taking up things like this immune sequence, which Mr. Iyengar himself had put together and promoted during another pandemic in India. And now I'm told that this is being recommended for everyone in India to be doing this sequence daily. So this is a sequence that you could actually practice, and you can see there's lots of props and things involved here, but it could actually help support your immune system. So I just want to bring up one other thing as we're thinking about science and meditation, and I'm really advocating that we do the work and go inside and connect with ourselves. But the research in this field is also beginning to yield some interesting ideas about how we might be able to use technology to be able to help treat things like depression and anxiety, but not having people do all that hard work, but using devices and being able to stimulate the brain directly. This is a recent study by Jay Sanguinetti that Julie and I both heard him talk about at USC just last week, where they're actually taking these ultrasound devices and being able to direct these ultrasound rays like directly into the brain. This is actually stimulating the anterior cingulate cortex, which is known to be involved in attention and awareness. And what they showed was with a 30-minute ultrasound treatment that you could see an increase in mindfulness. And so there's a question as to whether or not this could become a useful treatment for depression and anxiety. It does raise the question about what some people would call consciousness hacking. Is it okay to be able to go in and use these devices to stimulate our brains and kind of shortcut the methods that we would otherwise have to, use all these, meditation techniques ourselves? So it's kind of a question, and maybe that's something that could be up for discussion, as to what extent consciousness hacking techniques are useful, or are they going to produce the same result, or as spending all the time doing the hard work? So that's a question that we might throw out there for discussion. But Julie and I had thought of some other questions that might be good ones for the breakout sessions. One of them is, what do you do each day to maintain connections with yourself and with other people? What are those things that you're doing? And then, interestingly, how does technology both help and maybe even hinder those efforts to connect with yourself and others? And then finally, how has your own life purpose, what we could call your dharma, changed in the face of this COVID-19 moment? Many people are out of jobs, and we're having to really stop and think about, what is my purpose? What am I going to do? How are things going to look different for me down the road? So we're finding ourselves really thinking about, what is my purpose? What is my dharma? What is my duty here? So these are just some of the questions we thought could be interesting for breakout sessions. I want to again say thank you so much to inviting us, and have a wonderful time.
Thanks, Dr. Laura. And thanks again, everybody, for being with us today. Look forward to the discussions. Take care. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much, everyone. So we're going to go into breakout rooms, and then we'll get back into the main room for more discussion. So here we, hey, everybody.
Oops.
All right.
I guess when we turn to the chat, the Todd, right? The link disappear. So the chat in the breakout room and the chat in the main room differs.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I thought when I do the broadcast feature, I thought that would go into those channels for you, but obviously that's just a quick blimp of a message. And so good to know for next time.
Yeah. Do you mind posting out the doc link again, the Google link?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
There we go.
Cool. Thank you.
Yours. So yeah, does anyone, what did everyone talk about? I guess Julie and Laura like to go over anything?
I asked Gail if she might mind giving a little summary. Would you mind, Gail?
I don't mind. I was going to defer to Jason, but.
Oh yeah, Jason too, yeah.
Oh, you talk about me?
Oh, pardon me, not
The other Jason.
the other Jason.
The
Did
other-
we lose him? We lost him. All right, I'm on. We did touch on each of the three topics, and I think that our other group mate was the one who had maintained the best sense of continuity of scheduling and activities. He's got a very active exercise life, and he's maintained it. Julie and I both sort of fell off the wagon, but acknowledge the value of having that structure and those types of goals. And in Julie's and my case, the connection with others through the activity. And so we lost the connection and the activity. And I think we're both working back towards that. Technology, I think we were acknowledging as a plus, and Jason had a great deal to say about AI and IT. And in the case of Dharma, we were talking about action, sense of self, sense of control, perceived control, and then acting on it, action creating exemplars of that control.
Thanks, that was great.
Thank you.
Leslie, what did you talk about? Oh, he's not there. Or not. How about Jeff? What did you discuss?
Hey. Well, I guess speaking for myself, I've had a lot of time to learn and explore things that I've been curious about. And so a lot of research. And yeah, does anybody from the group want to add anything to that?
Mandy, right?
Yeah, so I think we also discussed a little bit about how technology helped us to connect in some ways more with people than we used to before, because you can really Zoom or Skype with people all over the world now. And when we're isolated, we tend to reach out more to others. And we found that we all do yoga and or meditation. And I think Wilson and I, both from an academia background, we're kind of now analyzing our purpose. Like, is our research actually meaningful, and does it have an impact on society? Because with all these things going on globally, it makes us feel like, well, maybe our research should be something that can help people, or like Wilson works on healthcare. So I think that's good.
Yep. We also talked about how this time period is kind of like a silent retreat in a way, a lot more time for reflection. Looking inwards.
Definitely.
I don't know if my group members are still here, but we went a little rogue, and some of my group members started coming up with their own questions. And so they were sort of peppering me with more questions. But one of the big questions that we talked about was kind of from a developmental point of view, how are the children of the future going to look? You know, these kids that Julie talks about in her book, who are really growing up with, you know, personal iPads, you know, how is this going to impact their brains, and are they going to be able to self-regulate? And so they're kind of worried about, you know, or thinking about what decisions are they going to need to make as parents at some point in deciding how much technology to introduce to their kids and at what age. So I think that was a really interesting question. But people also in my group seem to be open to the ideas of doing things like going on an e-fast, you know, or a tech fast, and maybe starting off the morning without rolling over and checking your phone or your email, but instead doing a practice connecting with yourself first thing in the morning, and then putting off the email and the social media until later, and then making a conscious choice to go and look at those things, and not having those things sort of directing your day and pulling you in to those devices. So that was interesting. We just talked about kind of the benefits of putting away tech for a little while and just giving ourselves time to connect with ourselves. Something that people don't always think about doing.
Yeah, I use my phone for like an alarm, right? And so it's the first thing I go to turn it off. And then once that happens, it's when the do not disturb, you know, goes away. And then I'm just like, oh, here's all these notifications from, you know, before while I was asleep. And it's sometimes hard to like just know, okay, because I know I've heard this many a time, right? Like definitely you should maybe start your day writing creatively, being more mindful, meditating, just something different, right? Just, but nothing traditionally you probably shouldn't be working with your phone or anything with technology. It's be best if you just go out into nature, if you're close to nature, or do something different. And so for me, that's what I've been trying to work on for the last few months, is a lot of different changes of routines and behaviors, but especially that morning piece, because everyone talks about like the successful entrepreneurs or any successful person has that, you know, core, you know, ritual in the morning, and that's what really sets them up for the day. The little wins in the morning that kind of gets you going. And so I'm trying my best to do that, but it's so hard. It's like not see, oh my God, like there are those texts or those emails that I have to like answer, and just like taking a breath and then doing something different and then getting back to it maybe 20 minutes later, but at least some other, some kind of buffer. So I'm definitely trying to do that myself.
Yeah, I actually, weirdly enough, started doing that before this pandemic. I just started like creating physical space. So it was like not technology space. And so the bedroom for me was always a non-technology space. So if anyone wanted to do anything that was technology related, and it was very strict, it's like even reading my Kindle, I'm like, I read physical books in my bedroom. I don't read Kindle, just to have a place where technology is allowed to be and where I'm allowed to be, that's not there. And so it's funny because like at first I was like, oh, so how do I wake myself up in the morning with an alarm? So I actually went and bought a physical alarm, which is really funny. But it's made such a difference just to have that space. It's like I know my body and my brain knows that like when I go into that space, I can rest. I'm not going to be woken up. I'm not going to have lights, interfering, because I'm getting notifications. I'm not going to have any of the anxiety or stress that I have when I'm on my phone or device in that space. And so my body just automatically knows when I'm there that that's like what that's for. And then also like to that, the morning has really changed too, because I'm not waking up and, I'm waking up on my time, not on what my phone wants me to do. And so like I'm able to do more of the ritual stuff, which is nice, like the writing and meditating and sort of like doing that before I do anything else. And that really has set it usually is great because it sets the tone for the rest of the day. So that's been really helpful. It's just like one of the things that kind of came up in our group's conversation was about feeling like you could really connect with people in technology and in a way that you haven't really before, but then also you're still separate from those people. Like there's people on this call that I'll talk to now, but then when I get off the call, I won't see you guys or talk to you again. And if I need like somebody to drop something off or help me with something, like this isn't the group of people at a call. So there's this weird disconnect that also happens where you're having access to people who are far away, but then locally you're kind of like in this weird, that's why I'm really curious about the word like liminality. Like it feels very liminal.
Yeah, just 2 days ago, my phone was having trouble charging, and so I was afraid that it wouldn't charge while I was asleep, and then I would sleep through, the day or the morning, I mean, and then not be able to have meetings. And so I actually pulled out of a drawer an old clock radio that I had from my childhood that I've had here, but I've never used right. It's always been in this drawer. It had a lot of dust on it, and I plugged it back in. But once my phone started working again, I'm back to my phone, because the real reason is because I just like the melody that my phone will give off compared to like the beep, 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 like, which is really annoying from the clock radio. And so I don't know. I've also used in the past, like years ago, I forget the name of the device, but basically it replicates the sun. And so it gradually, the light gets, brighter over time. There's some type of, music playing, not music, but like sounds from like the, Amazon forest or from like the beach. I forget what I used to have, but I tried that too. So I definitely tried a lot of different things. But I like your physical space idea too. I know Julie wrote that, but for me, I live in a loft. So I only have 2 rooms. It's the bathroom and then the rest of the loft. And my loft is like kitchen, right? Multiple zones. There's definitely multiple zones. Like the commute's really not bad. It's like jumping over the dog and then I'm at work. But yeah, trying to find that time, like that physical space. I feel like some people have talked about like, how do you transition? How do you turn off your brain from like work mode to like, social mode? And I've never been able to really master this in any way. But some people say like, well, it's every time I go and take my dog on a walk. And then once I get back home from that walk, I know now it's time to chill. And now it's not time to be doing any work. And so trying to find those, like, I guess, some type of activity to do that kind of separates you from that mental, that mindset you have. So I'm practicing that this week because I seriously don't have physical space to like do that with. But maybe if I leave my loft and then come back, maybe that will help me. I'll let you know later.
Well, they say that body hunger is a real thing, that humans are used to touch. And so by being far away from each other, we may not be aware of it, but just like going without food for a period of time, going without touch likewise has an impact on how we feel about ourselves. And so some of the people that I've been talking to suggest putting together routines. So for example, at the close of the day, maybe there's a kind of essential oil or some kind of ritual that you can go through where sometimes we have to remind ourselves of things. We love each other. We love ourselves. And sometimes the act of just taking some essential oils and rubbing them into our feet or into our body, if we can't get all of the touch that we used to have, from the pre-COVID world, we can still take those efforts to do that to ourselves today. And by establishing that routine, it helps us remain connected with other people.
I like that. That's good. Maybe like set it also like, I like maybe set it like lighting a candle or something. I don't know.
Maybe something good to mention here is that like everyone seems to have their own personal prescription, and really figuring out what works and then sticking to it has been huge, especially for me. So at the end of the day, maybe journaling what has worked and what hasn't worked for you, allowing those habits to become sticky in your life is great. Because if you figure out not using the phone for the first hour in the day is good for you, which is something I personally have seen, like making sure that that is an actual habit that sticks long enough is another challenge.
Kate, you have anything? Any crazy rituals you have?
One thing that I've been doing to sort of establish like my desk and work mode is just having a lemon on my desk to kind of, it has like this like sensory, like tactile, visual cues, as well as like smell. So it kind of can like establish, okay, now it's time, it's work time, versus if I'm using my desk for like chatting with people, if I don't have that lemon there, it kind of like establishes it's not work time right now. So that's something I've been trying to do.
Huh, I like that. Steven, are you on the line?
I am, yeah.
All right. What are any rituals you have for the mornings? Before all this hit, I would usually go like get coffee right at a coffee shop, like every day at some point, just as a ritual. But after we all got stuck inside under lockdown, I decided, well, why don't I start just making my own coffee? So I bought, a mocha pot, right? Which I don't know if people are familiar with this. You put the coffee in it, right? You put it on the stove, right? And it sort of like the water boils and it sort of percolates up in the pot. And then I ground my own coffee. And, this is kind of, it's kind of comforting, right? I mean, it's very tactile and, you can make the coffee whenever you like and you don't have to go out. So this has kind of been, I guess somebody mentioned rituals, right? So I think this has become kind of a ritual for me. And I think it's helped quite a bit. Awesome. Yeah, I stopped drinking coffee about 3 weeks ago. I started using this mud water. Have you ever again, probably Instagram advertisements probably for it, but it's chai tea. And it has a number of other things has a number of other things that I totally forget right now on top of my head. But I've been starting to do that, and that's like my little ritual. But yeah, back to the coffee. I used to go almost every day out at least to get a cup of coffee sometime in the day, and just those like, I don't know, it was interesting, like seeing other people smile right now with like the, other people's like, having that small chat, that small talk in the coffee spot with the barista that, would still remember me and whatnot. Like all those little like micro moments have been, we don't have them anymore. And so it's been really interesting not having that. But I still have to walk my dog every day, so at least I get to see the other dog owners. So I have that going for me. But I know not everyone has dogs, so I don't know what else other people are doing. Are you guys going on long walks, or what are you doing to get outside the house?
I've got actually a nice little solution for that one. The gym in my building is, of course, closed right now. So I've started doing just what you said, going out for long walks. And living in LA, we can do that most days. But one of the other things that goes with that I think has really helped a lot is I'll make a point to keep an eye out for, you know, pretty flowers or interesting plants, or, you know, a door for, you know, just whatever's out there that's kind of interesting or pretty, and take pictures, and then I post them on Facebook. My friends in New York especially appreciate seeing plants pop up on their phones. But just, you know, kind of having that mindfulness of looking for the nice things that are out there, I feel like that lifts my mood every time I go out and do it. And then I'll usually also be, you know, chatting with someone on the phone or listening to a podcast while I'm out there. So I've got the usually the connection and the focus on beauty. And nature's doing just fine right now.
Yeah.
What I really am loving is hearing that people are like setting intentions, and that people are doing things more intentionally. And even if they're just small things, you set a small ritual, and you are just more observant and more aware and more intentional about your behavior. I think that's all great.
I think my health has improved a lot, both from not eating in restaurants 2 or 3 times a day, which is, it turns out I was spending an absurd amount of money just having somebody make food for me all the time. So yeah, kind of learning how to do that. Saved a lot of money, but then also I just got to get out of this apartment sometime, right? So going for those walks, or even going for a run, and just running a surprising distance just to stay outside a little longer and push a little harder. And yeah, so I'm surprised at how quickly I got in shape during this time.
Well, does anyone else have anything else they'd like to share? I know we've gone over 13 minutes over than usual, but I felt like this is a very important discussion to have. And I know I usually don't even talk, and this time I'm actually talking. So thank you. Julie, what's your morning routine? If you can share a little bit of that.
Well, you know, Dr. Laura and I have been talking, you know, in addition to my sociology degree, I have 2 counseling degrees. And so she and I have been talking about, you know, what we can bring to the community. And these are the kinds of things that we're trying to do, is to kind of bring awareness and what you can do. And, you know, one thing Dr. Laura said is, you know, as she says, she goes and does her practice on her mat. She'll do yoga, or she'll do some kind of meditation, and not go right to her phone. And the thing that she said that really struck me was, you know, when I go right to my phone, my day is just sort of controlled by the phone and the device. When I go to my mat, and, you know, we can use that to mean metaphorically all these kinds of behaviors that we're talking about. It doesn't have to be the literal mat, but she says, now I'm controlling my day. I'm not. And, you know, when you pick up your phone, there's so much coming at you. It's like, I was thinking about this morning. It's like 0 to 100, you know, boom, your brain, you know, and you're going. It's almost like anxiety level from the gate. And so I've been trying to follow Dr. Laura's practice, where, you know, I like to make coffee too, but I've been going and sitting in the sun. That's one of the things with COVID, is getting more sun, more vitamin D. And so sitting in the sun a little bit, or doing a meditation first. It doesn't have to be an hour or all day. It can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a small slice. But that little slice of starting on a slower mode and a more intentional mode, and then getting into, you know, the text, like you're saying, and all the emails and all that, then you just have a different, your brain isn't just on overdrive from the second you open your eyes. And I think it's just a little healthier, you know, all in all.
Along the same lines, Julie, in one of my projects, we've been using office hours with the idea of setting up a 2-hour period of time rather than being on these Zoom calls where we have to be present for every single moment. That by setting up these office hours where the mic is off and the camera's off, but it's set up on a live connection. So if someone has a question, you can turn your mic on and say, "Hey, Brian, what do you think about this?"
Oh yeah.
And that's given us the ability to have kind of that feeling of being in the same space, but not having to feel like, oh my gosh, I've got to be on my A game or even my B game constantly on the Zoom call. And I feel like that by giving ourselves permission to not have to be front and center all the time, that's really helped us kind of like get over some hurdles. So maybe
balance. Yeah, rebalance. Yeah, the Zoom thing is exhausting in some ways too. And, you know, we have so many now, and some people are talking about how their eyes are getting tired and things like that. That's why it's important to focus away from a screen too, not screens 24 hours a day, because of some of the physical aspects of it too.
You know, Cameron had mentioned something about journaling as well, and we talked about that in our group along with Kate. And there's something really nice that I found about the tactile sensation of having a Moleskine, bullet journal. I've been bullet journaling, and I've really gotten into like these pens, but taking like a page and just writing down, what am I going to do today? And just marking out the time. And a lot of times I'll do it the night before. I'll say, what are the things I need to get done tomorrow? And I'll write them down ahead of time so that then when I get up and look at it, it's right there. And then when I do check my email, I may need to have to add some things, obviously, but I've already kind of planned it out, and being able to look at that on something that's not electronic is somehow, it's just more soothing, I think, to the nerves, to have this physical book in your hands.
Activity.
And there is something about the brain that works differently when you actually physically write things out rather than typing them into a computer or speaking them. Yeah.
That's true.
I like using the whiteboard. I have a giant whiteboard back there on the wall. And I haven't done it in a while. I'm realizing now. I'm journaling the gratitude journal. Just simply start the day with the 3 things that you're grateful for. And I should get back to that. We all should, I think, because
yeah.
It's very clear to me that days that I started by just acknowledging 3 things that I'm grateful for were better than every other day. So I should get back to that.
That's a great reminder.
These are all amazing. Yeah. I love doing the to-do list before I go to bed. I use Post-it notes. I definitely have a lot of whiteboards too. And the gratitude list is definitely something that I've noticed as well, Jeff. It's like the days I do it, it's way better. The whole day is way better. And then I feel like, wow, like mentally, like, I don't know, things just change. It's really interesting. And so I'm definitely trying to keep that habit moving forward. But yeah, this has all been amazing, people. If you all like to, you have the Google Doc there if you want to share any more thoughts. We have a Discord channel, which we really haven't been using yet, but we'd like to continue the conversations. But again, we do this every Thursday. Thank you all for showing up and participating. Really just want to build this out and, give back to the community. And next week, we'll be having a discussion around contact tracing with another professor from USC, which will be great. Actually, no, sorry. Next week is the future of work. So actually next week, we're doing a totally different topic, focusing on the future of work. And that's going to be a panel discussion, and that'll be all on YouTube. And then the following week, we'll have a Professor Bhaskar talking about content tracing. So I'll send all of you an email probably tomorrow morning or later tonight with information. And so, yeah, thank you all again. And hopefully you have a great rest of your day. And hopefully you learned something today that you'll put into your daily routines. But again, I'd love to thank you, Dr. Laura Baker and Dr. Julie Albright, for an amazing conversation. And I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Namaste.
Appreciate it. Namaste, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Have a good
Bye,
day.
guys. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.